How did you meet Jon Lippens, and what was your relationship like?
So I was at a friend of mine's house looking at some of his art, and on one particular wall there was a piece, a turban-appointed rider on top of a camel. Kind of said it was kind of different from his other art in the house, and I asked a question simply, what's the story with this piece? And my friend told me a story about this guy named Jon Lippens, and I immediately I was fascinated and I wanted to know more. I asked if this guy was around, and sure enough, he lived in Fort Worth. And a week later, I was sitting in Jon Lippens' house with my friend Larry Brogden is my friend, and he told me the story in about a 10-15 minute stretch, and I knew instantly. I was like, if this guy would let me tell his story, I would very much like to tell the story, because my jaw dropped when he started speaking. And the most unassuming man you ever met. Jon Lippens was a sweetheart of a guy, but he lived through something that people like us that read books and love history can't even fathom. But he was there, and just the stuff he encountered was nothing short of jaw dropping. So.
You kind of alluded to this already, but what inspired you to write this book?
I think the moment that I met Jon in person and saw the kind of man he was, and some of the things he was telling me, I knew this is a guy who we should treasure. This is a treasure living amongst us, and he was relatively unknown. I think he's done a few articles over the years, but nobody's really told his story, and he shared that with me. No one's really told his life story, and once we started the project, it became almost an obsession for both of us to get it done. Jon was in the last stages of his life at that point, and we didn't know exactly how long, but he had really bad cancer all throughout his body. But when I learned this, and I learned the story he had to tell, I knew there was a sense of urgency to get the story told. So we met. She ended up meeting about every Sunday for a complete year up until the time he'd passed away, and I got to be really close with the man, and we became friends. And one of the greatest honors of my life to have met him and to have done the book and told his story. But that it was an easy decision to tell the story, assuming he would say yes, which he did. I knew right away that this is something I would really like to take on. So
I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball on this one, but what if you had to point to a lesson, or more than one, lessons that you learned from knowing Jon and hearing his story? What did you learn from that, from knowing him?
Well, that's a great question. Maybe that, sometimes the most unassuming people in life have maybe the most important message to share, or possibly, that you go through something terrible in your life, which Jon very much did, and saw some of the worst things humanity has to offer, and he, used that and overcame such tremendous, obstacles to live a normal life, overcame all that to do what he did, and lived a life, Christ-filled life, and very devout religious man. Worked a really hard life here. Was at Lockheed for many, many years, and most people never knew his story, and that's the really interesting thing to me, is he did all this amazing stuff during the World War II, and only his close friends really knew his story, and some of those aren't even around anymore. But he's largely unknown until the book came out.
So, in your meeting with him and working on the actual manuscript for the book, what did you enjoy most about that writing process?
I enjoyed seeing him every day, or every Sunday, excuse me. We became friends, like I said earlier. Every time I arrived at his house, I could see the joy in his face. He was really excited about this whole project, and I think it maybe, I don't know if it prolonged his life per se, but he had a real desire to see this thing through, and unfortunately he didn't make it to the end to see it published. But the joy he got from telling his story to me, a lot of this stuff is really hard to talk about for most people, especially someone who lived it like Jon. But I could tell he was really excited to share, intimate details in his life, and how he came to live in Fort Worth, and up until the very last days, we became friends. She was sharing some really personal stuff. I want to say that most of the stuff he hadn't shared really with many people outside of his really close immediate family. So.
On the other side, what was the hardest part of writing the book?
The hardest part was the amount of information Jon shared with me. A lot of it was pertinent, a lot of it not so much. I had to filter quite a bit because he's very politically inclined. He'd like to share his thoughts on a lot of different matters, some relevant and many not so relevant. And trying to tell a story about a man's life, I had to keep it focused on him and what he did and where he went with himself, and try to keep his political views maybe out of the picture as much as I wanted to, and he wanted me to include them. It was a hard call because we're trying to tell a story here and not so much get into the political side of things. If you catch my drift on that. So,
what do you hope people take away from Portraits of a Soldier?
I hope they see, people. There's a lot of people that love history, and hopefully they see a side of a man who experienced it firsthand, that life is really horrible in some regards, but then again there's always a path out of such a horrible place, assuming that person wants to find that path. I think what they can learn is life isn't always laid out in front of us the way we want it. Bad things happen in life. That's part of life, right? If it wasn't an end to life, it wouldn't be so special while we're going through it. But I hope they see the fact that a man can go through such terrible things, yet come out on the other side at peace with himself, and he found God, and he found a place, a purpose in his life after going through such a terrible experience.
Where did your own love of World War II history come from?
I'm an avid reader. I don't know why, but I've really drawn to nonfiction. So that being said, if you're a nonfiction lover, you almost have to be a fan of history. In World War II, obviously, there's lots of information out there, and it's not so long ago when this was happening. So people like me who've never experienced it firsthand or were alive to experience it get to read about it, and it's so overwhelmingly unbelievable, the things that took place during that period of time. That it's just always been something I'm really interested in to learn more. And there's people like Jon open up a whole new avenue for me. We can read 100 books, but Jon's story would never be told unless someone like me gets lucky and gets to meet the guy. So
as a book lover, kind of more generally speaking, what value do you see in books, just in general, as a piece of our culture? What do you think they offer? What do they bring to the table? I think
books offer the most direct pathway to knowledge, to intelligence. And to be perfectly honest, I think I consider myself, I guess, an educated person, but mostly because of books I've read. I think I might have squandered my college opportunities for one reason or another, but I think most of the information that I have useful to me in my daily life comes from reading it somewhere, or reading articles and things of that nature. But without the written word, books, I don't know where. I'm not a big ebook guy, and I don't like online stuff per se, but a book to me is a treasured thing. It's something you can actually hold, and once you finish it, you can pass it on to another and say, listen, I read this book and it really touched me, and I think you'd really enjoy it. And I've done that many, many times, and it's just something. It's almost like a memento. If you complete a task reading a book that's really meant something to you, and you can pass it on. It's just maybe a rite of passage in a way, but it always held really a special value to me.
This is your first book, or are you going to write anything else now that you've got a taste of being an author? I
absolutely love the experience writing this book for a lot of reasons, but yes, I'm already working on my second book, another nonfiction piece about a lady here in town, Datse Sultanov, if you want to know, but she's a very accomplished cellist here in town, but she's the widow of the 1989 Van Cliburn winner, Alexei Sultanov. So I've become friends with Datse, and I'm currently getting her story down on paper, and her life getting to this point is just it's another amazing story on a whole different level from Jon Lippens. But the things they had to overcome coming from Latvia to live here now, and some of the things she had to endure with the loss of her husband and going through the musical world like she has, and her positive attitude is what really got me interested in her story. But she's got a lot of story to tell, and I'm just lucky to be the one to tell it. So
you seem to have an interest in the arts as well as in history. Where did that come from? What do you enjoy most about them?
That's a great question. So the simple answer is this. When I was a bit younger, 10 to 15 years ago, a lot of my friends liked to play golf. I don't like golf at all. So when they would go play golf, I would need something to do. This is prior to having children and a wife. But I started going to galleries and museums and looking around, and I developed this love of art for some strange reason. It just really appealed to me. So when they'd go play golf, I'd be left alone, but that'd give me time to go look at the galleries and art and stuff. For some reason, that it just developed into this almost obsession with art. Now I'm some sort of, maybe a half-assed collector, but I love the whole experience. I met a lot of really incredible artists. I think the creativity thing that artists bring to the table is what, I'm not an artist per se, but I love the creative capacity that the artists bring to the mix. And there's something really special about people that can create something from nothing. That to me is something really special, and that's what maybe that's what I'm most drawn to.
Anything else you'd like to add about the whole process, or Jon Lippens, or his wife?
Sure. I would say this writing this book, and I think I mentioned it in the intro, but it's no doubt one of the greatest honors of my life. I got to meet a man who really, if I hadn't met him when I did, I got really lucky. Get a little emotional talking about it. Maybe you want to redo that one. So I met Jon Lippens at a special time because he was on the downward side of his life. I think I got really lucky when I met him, because if I hadn't met him when I did, the story would have never been told. That in itself is what makes this so special to me. I got just the sheer timing of the whole matter, and meeting a guy like this who deserves to have a story told. There's a lot of things that could have happened where this never would have happened, and maybe something really special happened that I got to meet the guy, and when he opened his mouth, talked for 5 minutes, I knew right away this was something that needed to happen. So, yeah.